He never saw it coming, and neither did I, until the day my phone rang and I heard my own son say 4 words that would end everything between us. "We moved, forgot to tell you." That was it. No goodbye, no explanation, just a flat, rehearsed sentence, like he was reading it off a script somebody else had written for him. I was standing in my kitchen in Millbrook, Ohio, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold, and for a second I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. Daniel didn't joke like that. My son had never once in 34 years called me with news that casual about something that big. "Moved where?" I asked. "Charlotte," he said. "Vanessa got a job offer. It happened fast, fast." That word would come back to me 100 times over the next 6 weeks. My name is Richard Halloran. Everyone calls me Rick. I'm 68 years old, and for 31 years I worked as a forensic accountant, the last 19 of those for a firm called Whitfield and Cross out of Columbus, where my entire job was finding the money people didn't want found. Embezzlement, insurance fraud, shell companies built to hide assets in divorce cases. I built a career out of noticing the small inconsistency that everyone else walked past. I retired in 2021, 3 years after my wife Carol was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's, so I could take care of her. She passed away 8 months before that phone call in March. I won't pretend the 8 months after her death were good ones. I was forgetting things. Small things where I put my glasses, whether I'd paid the water bill. My doctor called it grief fog and told me it was normal, that it would lift. I believed him, mostly because I wanted to. The house I was standing in when Daniel called wasn't just a house. It was my father's house before it was mine. A 4-bedroom colonial on Ridgemont Lane that my dad, Walter Halloran, built with a construction loan in 1968 and paid off working double shifts at a steel plant. When he died in 1994, he left it to me outright, along with about $340,000 in savings and stock that had grown, over the years, into a trust worth close to $900,000 by the time Carol got sick. That trust paid for her care. It was supposed to pay for mine too someday, and whatever was left was supposed to go to Daniel and his 2 kids, Emma and Josh. So when Daniel told me he and Vanessa had moved to Charlotte without a word of warning, my first reaction wasn't suspicion. It was hurt. My second reaction, about 4 days later, was the beginning of something else entirely. I went looking for a folder, property tax documents I needed for my own filing, in the study, in the same filing cabinet where I'd kept every important paper in that house for 20 years. The folder wasn't in its place. It had been moved to the very back, behind old insurance records, jammed in sideways, the way you shove something back when you're in a hurry and don't care if it looks right. I stood there for a long moment just looking at that drawer, because moved paperwork is the first thing you learn to notice in my line of work. People who aren't hiding anything don't reorganize a stranger's filing cabinet. People who are hiding something always leave it slightly wrong. I found the tax folder eventually. What I found next, I wasn't looking for. Underneath a stack of old bank statements was a document I did not remember signing, dated 4 months earlier. A durable power of attorney, naming Daniel Patrick Halloran as my agent, granting him authority over my financial accounts, my property, and my trust. My signature was on it. I stared at that signature for 10 minutes. It looked like mine. It also looked like mine had looked when I was tired, rushed, distracted, the kind of signature I might give someone who told me it was just a formality, Dad, in case something happens. Everyone our age should have one. I remembered, vaguely, signing something at Daniel's kitchen table back in June, over dinner, while Vanessa poured wine and told me how good it was that I was finally getting my affairs in order. I remembered being told it was a healthcare directive. I did not remember being told it gave my son control of my money. That's when the fog my doctor had warned me about started to feel less like grief and more like something that had been used against me. I called my bank the next morning, First Ridgeline Trust, where the Halloran family account had sat since my father opened it in 1971, and asked for a full transaction history going back 6 months. What came back 3 days later made my hands shake for the first time in years. Between June and October, $187,400 had moved out of the trust account in 4 separate wire transfers. each one just under the $50,000 threshold that would have triggered an automatic fraud review. All 4 transfers went to an account belonging to an LLC called Halloran Property Solutions, registered in North Carolina in July, 1 month after that power of attorney was signed. The listed manager of Halloran Property Solutions was Vanessa Halloran. There was more. A home equity line of credit had been opened against the Ridgemont Lane house in August for $210,000, secured with my signature and my POA on file. Closed within 11 days at a title office in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, a state I hadn't set foot in since Carol's cousin's funeral in 2019. There were invoices, 7 of them, from a company called Buildrite Renovation Group, totaling $63,000 for kitchen and bathroom work at Ridgemont Lane that had never happened. I know because I was living in that kitchen every day. Nobody had touched it since 2015. I sat at my father's old desk with all of it spread out in front of me and did what 31 years of training taught me to do. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't confront him. I picked up the phone and called Frank Delgado. Frank and I had known each other since 2003, when I worked a joint fraud case with the FBI's Columbus field office involving a Medicare billing scheme. He'd retired from the bureau 4 years before I retired from Whitfield and Cross, but we still had lunch every couple months. 2 old men complaining about how nobody trained fraud examiners the right way anymore. When I told him what I'd found, he went quiet for a long time. "Rick," he finally said, "I need you to listen to me carefully. Don't call him. Don't confront Vanessa. Don't even hint that you know. If they think you're onto them, that LLC account gets drained tonight, and you'll spend 2 years in court trying to prove what you already have sitting on your desk. You act exactly the same as you always do. Sad old dad missing his son doesn't understand computers. Let me pull what I can on the LLC filings and the title transfer, and you start documenting everything, dates, statements, that POA. Make copies. Keep them somewhere Daniel's never been, not the house." So that's what I did. For 5 weeks I lived a kind of double life in my own home. I photographed every document and stored the copies in a safe deposit box at a different bank across town. I kept a written log, the same way I used to build a case file for Whitfield and Cross, time-stamped and organized. And I answered the phone every Sunday when Daniel called from Charlotte, and I talked about the weather and about Josh's soccer season, and I told him I missed having them close by. Every single time, it cost me something to keep my voice steady. There was one call in the 3rd week that still sits heavy in my chest. Daniel mentioned, almost offhand, that the market up here is honestly better than Ohio right now. "Dad, you should think about downsizing, maybe letting go of the Ridgemont house. It's a lot of upkeep for one person." I asked him, as gently as I could manage, what he thought I should do with it. He said, "Vanessa actually knows some people. We could handle all of it for you. You wouldn't have to deal with any of the stress." I told him I'd think about it. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. Frank found the rest 2 weeks later. Halloran Property Solutions, LLC, had been registered with a business address that turned out to be a UPS mailbox store in Charlotte. Vanessa's name was on the formation documents, but so was a second name I didn't recognize, a title agent named Curtis Boyd, who, it turned out, had also processed the fraudulent home equity line and had a prior professional complaint on file with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission for a similar refinance scheme in 2021, involving an elderly client in Asheville. Frank also got hold of text messages between Daniel and Vanessa, pulled legally, later, through the investigator I eventually hired, a private forensic examiner named Patricia Wren, who specialized in elder financial exploitation cases. One message from Vanessa, sent in May, read, "He's not going to notice. He barely remembers what day it is since Carol died. We just need the POA signed and we're set." Daniel's reply, sent 4 minutes later, "Just don't make it weird at dinner. Let him think it's for healthcare stuff." Reading those words on a printed page, in my son's own phone number in his own account, did something to me that finding the money never had. The money was a number. Those texts were a decision. He had looked at his father, grieving, foggy, trusting, and decided I was an opportunity instead of a parent to protect. By the 2nd week of November, Patricia and I had a complete case file. The forged intent behind the POA, the 4 wire transfers, the fraudulent HELOC, the phantom renovation invoices, the Shell LLC, and the text messages showing clear premeditation. Frank connected me with a detective in the Ohio Attorney General's Elder Abuse Unit, a woman named Detective Renee Acaffer, who reviewed everything and told me, flatly, Mr. Halloran, this isn't a gray area. This is felony exploitation of a vulnerable adult, forgery and wire fraud, and it's a strong case. She asked me one question before we went further. Do you want to press charges against your son? I didn't answer her right away. I thought about my father building that house with his own hands. I thought about Carol sitting at that kitchen table for 30 years. I thought about Emma and Josh, who had no idea what their parents had done. And then I thought about those 4 minutes between 2 text messages, the calm efficiency of people planning around a grieving man's memory like it was a scheduling problem. Yes, I said. I do. Detective Acaffer asked me to set up one more phone call, recorded with my consent under Ohio's one-party consent law, where I'd ask Daniel directly about selling the house, give him the opening to repeat what he'd already told me, on the record, in his own voice. I called him on a Thursday evening. I asked him plainly what he thought I should do about Ridgemont Lane. And my son, without hesitation, told me that Vanessa had already got some paperwork moving, and that it would be so much easier if I just signed off on the final transfer while I still could. Before things got complicated, he used those words, while I still could, as if my mind were already a liability to be managed around, not a father to be respected. 2 days later, Daniel and Vanessa were arrested in Charlotte on an Ohio warrant, extradited back for the initial hearing. The charges included forgery, exploitation of an elderly or disabled adult, and wire fraud, spanning both Ohio and North Carolina jurisdictions. Curtis Boyd, the title agent, lost his license and faced separate charges tied to the pattern the Real Estate Commission had already been building against him. The court froze the funds still sitting in the Halloran Property Solutions account. $94,000 of the original $187,400 was recovered. The HELOC was voided, and the lien released once the fraud was established. It took 11 months, but in the end, a judge ordered full restitution of the remaining amount, sentenced Daniel to 18 months with a portion suspended for cooperation and no prior record, and sentenced Vanessa to 3 years, given her role in orchestrating the LLC and the forged filings. I won't tell you the restitution made it feel finished. Money came back into an account. My son did not come back the way he was. The hardest part wasn't the courtroom. It was Emma, 12 years old, calling me crying, asking why Grandpa was doing this to her dad. I didn't have an answer that a 12-year-old could carry. I only had the truth, and the truth is heavier than a child should have to hold. I've made sure through everything that Emma and Josh know this was never about them, that there's a trust, untouched now, waiting for them when they're old enough. Held by an independent trustee this time, not family. Daniel called me once from a visitation line near the end of his sentence. He said he was sorry. He said they were desperate, that Vanessa's business had failed, that they panicked and told themselves it was temporary, that they'd have paid it back eventually. I let him finish. Then I told him the same thing I used to tell every fraud case I ever built a file on, back when it was still just a job, and not my own family sitting across from me. Desperate people make choices. But you didn't make one choice, Daniel. You made a plan. You wrote a script for your own father and handed him the pen. I still live in the house on Ridgemont Lane. My father built it with his hands, and I nearly lost it to my son's signature. I've since put safeguards in place I never thought I'd need. A second trustee, a monitored account, an elder law attorney who checks in every quarter, not because I don't trust myself, but because I've learned trust isn't something you extend once and forget. It's something you verify, the same way I spent 31 years teaching other people to do, right up until it was my own family standing on the other side of the ledger. Blood may be thicker than water. It is not thicker than a signature, a wire transfer, and a text message sent 4 minutes too soon. I didn't lose my son to a courtroom. I lost him the day he decided my grief was something he could put a price on. Thank you for watching.